Alright, listen up. Tonight, a spy stole important blueprints, and he got away. However, we were able to gather information and tracked him to his last known location. He escaped with the supply train. We will ride a train on the same tracks, dropping you off at every station in small groups to search the area. Find him and make sure those blueprints don't fall into enemy hands. Got it?
Alisa, the next stop is yours.
Okay, let's talk survival horror. Resident Evil, Dead Space, Signalis, Resident Evil 2, Alien Isolation, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, The Evil Within, Resident Evil 4. You get the picture. It's a genre very much so dominated by one game series. Though, what if I told you there was a game that had recently been released that was in the spirit of the original Resident Evil, yet has gotten almost no attention whatsoever? What I'm talking about is Alisa by Casper Crows, though they say Alisa in the opening, so I'm just gonna flip-flop between the two. It's very much designed in the style of like an old school PS1 game in the modern era, similar to the Bloodborne remake that came out recently. Alisa, or Alisa, whatever you want to call it, is a self-described classic late 90s style horror-themed action-adventure game set in a fantasy universe inspired on the 1920s. It is an absolute fever dream that's filled with clockwork automatons, horrible science abominations, and a whole lot of dolls, considering the game takes place in a dollhouse. While the game has a lot of issues that come with the time, I think it's definitely one of the best survival horror games I've played in a long time. And it's for that reason I'm making this video to kind of go over my experience and my thoughts on the game itself. There's a few things we should probably talk about before I go into it, and the first of which is that everything you see is very dated in terms of appearance. That is a purposeful decision. You can read about it a bit more on the Kickstarter page, and I would argue that Casper Crows, the creator of the game, his specialty comes from making games feel dated. He made Phoenix Corruptia, or Red Woman Standing Next to Guy from Fear and Hunger, as you can see on his Twitter page. If you play that game, you'll know exactly what I mean by his specialty being games are dated. That game is not fun for me, but it's free, and I played it for like maybe half an hour prior to this. I don't want to really go into it. You can try it yourself. It is what it looks like. Now, 2, Alisa is actually a Kickstarter project. There's some stuff he says on there that makes a lot of sense for the artistic vision of the game. He states that, "I made this game concept and I thought it would be a cool idea to mix the classic Resident Evil with the spooky Svank Mages." I'm not sure how you say that. Alice, "I think this idea is really well done within the actual game in terms of mixing the classic Resident Evil with Svank Mages Alice." I looked up some stuff about it prior to this since I had never heard it, but you can see the influence. But I don't understand everything else he says. He says he got some inspiration from other games such as Bloodborne and Call of Duty, and even he himself puts question marks next to Call of Duty. I think the only connection to those games is the fact that Call of Duty has guns and Bloodborne also has guns. I guess I get it with some of the overall areas and stylistic choices, but Call of Duty is actually out of left field. Anyway, I guess the point isn't really so much that this is a Kickstarter project, it's more that Casper Crows has a lot of stuff that comes from his own vision that I won't fully understand because I was not a day one fan of Alisa/Alisa from its conception. But I think the actual game is worth talking about. So we're just gonna go in there and we're gonna go through just about everything. So yeah. The game begins the same way this video opened, A spy has stolen important blueprints and successfully evaded the Empire with the blueprints in tow. I don't really know whether or not Alisa actually serves an Empire, but we have an Emperor, so that's what I'm going with. The Empire has found the train the spy used for his escape, but they're not sure which station he got off at. So Alisa and the other soldiers will be deployed at every station in small groups to search the area at each station. We're paired with Jean-Francois, the French gentleman with a toothpick in his mouth. Once we arrive, I struggle with the controls for a little bit. So Alisa has the option for both modern and tank, and because I'm a filthy degenerate, I used modern my entire playthrough, and I did get used to it, but it took me a while due to the sudden changes of the camera, but it did work out. So I think you can play with either, but I enjoyed using modern. It is pretty not smooth and not seamless, but they work, so that's all good. So, first things first, we tag along with Jean to investigate this house.
Oh, hello there. What brings you guys to these parts?
Sorry for bothering you, sir. We are looking for a man. He might have passed these parts. Have you seen a person like this?
Ah, yes. Very kind fella. He stayed here for a cup of tea and headed for the forest behind my house not so long ago.
You say he came in for a moment. Can we take a quick look around? It won't take long.
Of course. Come in.
This conversation brings up a lot of stuff that there's no reason for us to talk about until later in the video, due to the fact none of this goes beyond world building currently.
Everyone went to work in the big cities, since factory work was on high demand and granted more work stability.
What about you? Why did you stay here?
The only thing that's important is the
I'm
picture
already too old
with
for that.
Elise and the woman in black. We'll talk about them more later, but that's
Yes,
really the
exactly.
only thing you should be thinking
The doors
about
have been shut
now that we
tight
continue.
for quite a while now.
So, what do you do during the journée?
Oh, just some reading, a bit of writing, or sometimes I go for a walk outside.
D'accord. I'll leave you to it then. Thank you for your time. We'll be on our way now.
Over there! It's him! Halt! Stop right there!
Vite! Let's get him!
We continue through the forest in an attempt to hunt down the spy, and right as we spot him,
Jan, what are you doing?
I swallowed my cure-dent.
Are you okay?
Go, Alisa. Don't let him s'échapper.
Here, use the rat signal in my backpack. Don't worry, I'll catch him.
we attempt to go after the spy ourselves, but that also doesn't turn out particularly well.
Where did he go? What's going on? What kind of monsters?
So this leads to an attack from the very first dolls we encounter throughout the game. These creepy little, like, mixture of those infantile dolls. You know the ones. This kind of looks like something out of Resident Evil 8. But I think they're supposed to represent, like, those little porcelain ones of babies. I don't know. And I also don't really want to, like, do a bunch of searching to find them on the internet. But I'm sure if you're out there, you know what I'm referencing. Anyway, if you actually defeat all of these guys, you get an achievement for doing so. You only have a saber and a pistol, but it is possible. Though it's not possible here because I got murked, and then Alisa is kidnapped and the game begins. Before I go into the complete story and a run-through of an Alisa playthrough, basically, let's talk a bit more about the game functionally. Alisa is very much akin to the original Resident Evil. You're in a big mansion and you solve puzzles, you shoot enemies, and occasionally you'll run from an invincible monster that wants to kill you. Combat in Alisa is based on the little chart in the bottom right. If you can see the target, that little orange reticle, that means your attack will hit. If you can't see the target, that means your attack will not hit. You have an aim button, and you can tilt left, right, up, and down, and you can shoot. Auto aim is an option you can enable at the start, but there's a currency penalty, at least for a little bit, while you use it. Though it's also an upgrade you can get after beating the first boss, which doesn't take too long. So there's no reason for anyone to really feel discouraged over it. It feels pretty good to shoot and aim. The reason triggers aren't used is I think it was to mimic an original PlayStation 1 controller, but I've never even owned a PS1, so I couldn't tell you that for fact. But the gameplay loop consists of running around the mansion, killing monsters throughout, fits camera angles, solving puzzles, though there's not a crazy amount of them actually in this game. As I was going through all the events for this, I don't normally like scripting stuff for videos, but there was just so much and I didn't want to miss anything. I really remembered there being more puzzles than there actually are in the game. And other than that, you can avoid a lot of enemies like classic survival horror, but there's actually enough ammo in the game to where I'm pretty sure you can kill everything and then some. I had plenty left over for the final boss, and I could have got more to kill every single enemy in the game if I wanted to. It's not like Signalis, which is much more stingy with ammo management, but I think one of the reasons that the game lends itself so well to having more ammo is because a lot of the enemies are fought in the exact same way. You bait them out into attacking, and then you either fill them with puncture wounds with your sword, which saves you bullets, or you can just fill them with bullets. Though granted, there's an awesome variety in every enemy that you see, and one of my favorite parts of going through the game was seeing all of the different enemies that show up. There's so many enemies too, they're just like random one-shots, and that's it. And that's cool to me. It's cool that an encounter was designed with just one random enemy there, and that way you just never see him again. It's cool and unique, and I think it's just fun overall. Though this isn't like exactly a praise of every enemy either, because some of them are just straight up awful to fight. I'm not going to go into detail here about it, mainly because I think that's a whole lot of just ranting that I can save for later on when it's a bit more applicable. But the only complaint I have is I think the crawling ones are a little too fast given the old school controls, but it's nothing impossible, and with the game's intention of replicating an original PS1 game, it is the point. But I think the initial gameplay loop in terms of combat and exploration works really well, especially given that, just like any classic survival horror game, the game isn't that long. The dollhouse feels really populated throughout the game, and it's fun going through and seeing the changes happen throughout, similar to the original Resident Evil mansion. And even though some of the puzzles do leave a bit to be desired, we'll go through each puzzle in the video. I don't want to spoil anything here in case you're watching this part, just to get a bit more of an overview. But they're honestly not too hard, like maybe maybe like 2 standouts that are just not great. But I think there's a lot to enjoy, and just know going into it that you're really going to find something to appreciate here. The only other thing is that interacting with everything in Alisa/Alisa is super important, just for understanding more of the story and just item collecting in general. I think they're a lot easier to see in this game than something like Silent Hill 2, but I don't know. I still feel like I missed a ton of stuff in my own playthrough. Other than that, for an old school PS1 style game, I think my biggest praise has to be figuring out where to go in Alisa is super easy. The game does a fantastic job on directing you on where to go without ever telling you where to go. There's one segment where after the first boss, I felt really lost for a while, but I think overall it really works. The overall design of the mansion is very seamless, and even though it has these purposeful technical limitations in place, to mimic the older style of survival horror, I think it works to its benefit, making it just feel so unique in a time when so many indie games coming out are roguelike deck builders, you know? Like, there's just something so unique about a survival horror game that goes above and beyond at emulating both the good and the bad of the classics. Though, I would put this right up the original Resident Evil. That's how fantastic of a time I had with it. And I would encourage anybody to go through, buy the game on Steam and give it a try. But I'll shill it more later. You have no reason to trust anything I say. But yeah, that's all I got for the review, unless me in the future has anything to say. Yo, it's me. I'm in my most dollhouse-esque outfit that I could find, and now I kind of want to talk about some of the Steam reviews for the game. I read through only really negative ones because I thought they had a lot of compelling points and reasons to leave negative reviews, and I get that. A lot of the complaints were with the controls. Some people were with getting the controller set up. I think I might still have a clip about me struggling to get the controller connected. And it kind of ticked me off, but it's okay because I actually did. And you can tell I like the game because you're watching this video I made on it. You guys hear that? Oh, come on, dude. We'll be back again! Let's move on and talk about the actual complaints. Combat was the most predominant negative opinion I saw. And I think they actually have a lot of merit to say that. I get that it isn't fun to strafe around enemies, or if you get hit once by the clown, you're just stun locked until you die. That doesn't work, and that's not fun. But it is old school. It is adhering to games at the time. So maybe it's just being more faithful, but in all like realisticness, I'm sure it's just an oversight that was made. But moving on, the people who are complaining about the combat, I think they have fair points, but by the same point, I don't think it's that bad. As said, I'd encourage you to try it yourself if those reviews kind of have you on edge with trying out the game. I don't think it's that bad, and I think it especially gets better as you use more weapons, and if you go through the game without the sword, you're just doomed. There is zero way to just enjoy the game, I think, without it. Now, my only major thought here as well is a lot of people didn't seem to understand the reticle system. I kind of think the game could do a better way of like giving you a tutorial on it maybe. That's like super clear, but I picked it up pretty fast, but I know not everybody else can because a whole lot of it is just sort of, you know, guesswork. Though it's nice that there's an auto aim option in the game, though it wasn't always, and I think that's one of the reasons so many people, well, it's not like a ton, but one of the reasons for negative reviews is a lack of auto aim, because when they played the game when it came out, it didn't have it. So I think those are all fair complaints to make with the game. But it was nice to see that everybody still loves the art style, everybody adores the overall presentation, and the world of Alisa is just so interesting to me. We're going to get Alisa the Parting, maybe. I thought it was an April Fool's Day thing, but I checked Casper Crow's Twitter, and I think he's cooking up something, so I'm pretty excited. Anyway, I think that's all I have really for this segment. One thing I didn't do a ton in this video is I didn't go through every single doll I encountered, which I kind of regret and kind of semi-don't regret, because part of me wants you to kind of see them yourself as you go through the game, but also I still showed off a lot of them, so I don't feel that bad about it. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else I have to bring up with the game in this moment. But as said, you may see future me at some point. I don't know. I'm still adding this, but I think it's all going to turn out pretty good. I realized I got so caught up with the game explanation on how the targeting worked, I never actually went through all of the weapons available in the game, which is kind of crazy. So I'm just gonna kind of run through them all super fast, what I like and dislike about each, and overall just give a brief overview. The pistol is the best weapon in the entire game. It is useful throughout due to the fact there's so much ammo for it. And it's a quick reload. It makes a satisfying sound. It is absolutely the best possible choice throughout the entire game. So you only get 2 weapon slots, which makes everything kind of more difficult, considering that you don't really have a lot of leeway, considering there's only... Well, okay, I guess there's boss weapons, in all fairness, but I didn't really use those in my playthrough, and I couldn't tell you a ton about them. You can get these as drops from bosses. After you defeat one, you can go to an NPC later on, and he will go ahead and let you purchase them for Toothwheels. Though, once you do that, you're locked out of the other rewards. It's sort of like how in Dark Souls, once you get the soul or essence or remembrance of whatever enemy, you can only exchange it for one reward, not multiple. But I'm just talking about the main weapons here, since while there's a multitude of other melee weapons, those are boss weapons. So the pistol is fantastic. The next is the blunderbuss shotgun, which is absolutely awful. I used it in one of the boss fights later on, and that's about the extent of it. It just takes so long to reload, and it's useful in very specific situations, but at that point, you're better off just using the pistol, since just having one shot in the blunderbuss just makes it so punishing. The sword is fantastic. You can beat the whole game with just the sword, except maybe the first boss. I love the sword. It deals great damage. It can stun lock. You have so much freedom when moving it, and I feel like it's always easy to hit stuff with it, as opposed to with some of the clunkiness that comes from lining up so that you can see that reticle. The sword is fantastic. There's the machine gun. I used it to shred the second boss like there's no tomorrow. They were just absolutely annihilated through everything that was done. And it's a strong weapon throughout the entirety of the game. I like it, and it flies through ammo, but it's so worth it. Next up is the revolver. Basically just the Magnum from Resident Evil. It serves the same purpose mechanically, and it just murks people with no difficulty whatsoever. It's great against bosses, but other than that, there's not really a ton of application throughout the mansion, since with the exception of a couple enemies, you really don't need to deal that much damage. There's the crossbow, which I heard about from a friend, and I read about. I didn't get it because I'm a dummy who used an item in the wrong spot. So I couldn't tell you, but I'm assuming the crossbow's pretty good, but I could be wrong. There's the pump shotgun towards the end of the game. It's like the blunderbuss, but insane. It's just the combat shotgun from the original Resident Evil. It deals crazy damage, and you can just fire it as much as you need. And honestly, I think it's just the best. Well, it's definitely the best shotgun, but it might be the best gun, granted. You just have to be pretty smart about reloading it and just kind of navigating everything with it. But it takes my vote for the best gun. And the last one is the high-powered rifle you can see in the shop at the end of the game. It's basically the revolver, but a rifle. It looks a lot cooler, but that's all I can tell you about it, other than I didn't actually use it. I think all of these weapons add a lot of variety to the game, and I honestly wish there was more reason to use the others for like variety, but by the same point, I was always trying to be a little conservative about my Toothwheels so that I could save in the right spots and just have an idea on if I'm stuck on something, I can just go buy medkits. Or if I really, really need ammo, I can go buy ammo. Stuff like that. So I kind of wish the game motivated you to try more of the boss weapons or more of just the arsenal in general, since I feel like a lot of it, you just kind of run through the game with the pistol and the sword. But as said, it's a minor complaint. It's just something to think about, but I don't really go through the weapons in the video. You can see throughout the footage that I pick up different ones throughout my adventure, but I never really touched on it. which to me is fine, but I know for some people they'd want to know more about the actual arsenal. So here you go. That's what this little segment was for. With the inventory system forcing you to only carry 2 weapons and the rest stay with Charlotte, I think that's fine. There's only a few parts of the game where I kind of wished I had more options, but I also think having more weapon slots would have allowed me to experiment more with the other weapons or be more motivated to get other weapons. So, as said, that part's a mixed bag, but honestly, it doesn't really change my opinion of the overall game. It's just something like, I think 3 would have been perfect, but I also think it wouldn't have been because it would have been too much. In regards to the actual inventory management and with picking up items, you have infinite space and you can grab as many medkits as you want, really. I'm good with that. I never enjoyed the survival horror aspect of, I'm carrying too much junk, I have to purposefully waste resources now, or I have to make the crawl back to the bots to put stuff in, or I don't have a spot for this key item. Stuff like that, I've never been a big fan of. I think it kind of worked. No, I think it just works in Resident Evil 4, but that's it. And I guess it works in Resident Evil 2. I don't know, maybe I do like it, but secretly. But I hate it in Resident Evil 1, dude, and I hated it in Signalis. I'm happy that the inventory is just modernized as well. The game has a lot of, like, little technical pieces like that overall make it feel very good for a game that could probably run on, like, Windows XP or, I don't know, your grandma's old dusty computer she uses to play Words with Friends on Facebook on. There's a lot of, like, care that was put into making the port just workable, and I'm thankful for that. But by the same point, it's so crazy how this game feels both new and groundbreaking and dated all at once. But anyway, that's enough. I just also wanted to touch on the inventory system and a bit more on my thoughts with the you can only carry 2 weapons at a time.
Where am I? What is this? I need to get out of here.
Alright, now that Alisa has woke up and is now fully strapped, it's time for us to actually go through the game.
Excuse me.
You don't really get a ton of downtime immediately, since right out the door is the first encounter and the actual real tutorial enemy. Now we're introduced to the first open level of the mansion. It's pretty sprawling and there's a lot to talk about, but first I want to go on about our 2 companions for the game, Charlotte and Pole.
Hey, you! No, don't shoot. I can help you.
Who are you? What is this place?
My name is Paul, and this is the dollhouse.
The dollhouse? No, really? What's going on here? And why am I wearing this dress?
Yes. Well, can't help you with that. But if you can bring me some Toothwheels, like this one, I might be able to exchange them for some extra firepower.
Hey, don't fool me, puppet.
Toothwheels or nothing.
As you just saw with the cutscene, Pole is that wonderfully funny puppet who serves as the Resident Evil 4 merchant of the entire game. You can save your game with him, which costs you 1 Toothwheels worth of currency. So you can't just save over and over. Well, I guess you could just save over and over, but then you just lose a ton of money for no reason. You can buy guns, outfits, and supplies, which I believe are limited in total, but I don't know how limited, and honestly, you could go forever without buying stuff from them, really. I mean, there's an achievement you can get by beating the game without killing any dolls whatsoever, which basically means no money. But the positive of this is that it means the game is possible to beat without killing any dolls. So the nice thing here is that Pole is just a funny puppet, and all he does is serve as your merchant throughout the entire game. I love his appearance. He's so silly. I really, really, really wanted the Pole from Makeship. Casper Crows ran a campaign to try to make Pole a reality, and it didn't go through at all, which breaks my heart, and it makes me super sad. And you can check my Twitter to see how upset I was when it happened. But that's Pole. I love him, and I adore him. He's funny.
Oh, that's Charlotte. She will take care of your possessions. Now, take a look inside.
Charlotte is the name of the wardrobe, and she also holds the title of the baddest bitch in Alisa. There's a note in here about the pulsometer, which means nothing to us so far. And inside the main hall of the manor, there's nothing but fodder to get the most important item in the game, the sword. The sword has infinite ammo, deals good damage, along with the fact that it lets you save ammo in a survival horror game and still kill enemies. Not to mention, killing enemies without bullets is great, considering every enemy drops currency as well. And most of the game is spending money at Pole's shop. The first section has us solving a puzzle. There's an empty hole, and we need to collect 3 letter blocks to fill it in. And each block is collected by a different method. There's the trial by fire, and the reason the sword is so important at the start, you can use the sword to kill this giant infant. I have a friend who played through the game, and he said that every fight in this game was comically unfair, except this one. I disagree. But you could argue he's the most fair fight in the game. But this is also, I think, where I died the most in the game. I don't know. I hate this guy. He should be in a fighting game with how hard he swings, dude. But he does teach you all the mechanics of combat. You hit him once, sometimes twice. You book it. He does an attack. You go in. You hit him. Rinse and repeat. And if you poke him in the eyes, he weeps and covers his face, which is actually a pretty cool mechanic. Anyway, we found another block piece by a note about Pier Edmonston. This is all the way up the stairs. And on the way up the stairs as well, we get a peek at somebody walking around. You may not be able to recognize him, but this is actually the spy we came here to hunt, which means we're not alone, which is both comforting and concerning. Anyway, back to Pier though, he's also the guy who was mentioned in the note about the pulsometer earlier. And he's lost his marbles, but he knows what fun is all about, so how bad could he be? And the last one is unlocked through this sliding block puzzle. I personally hate these things. I loved them when I was a kid, but now that I'm a full-grown adult, I just don't think I'm as smart as I used to be. I think my frontal lobe may be done developing. I will say though, I look back on it positively, even if when I did it, I was thinking, man, this sucks. This leads you to a locked bedroom, which I actually think is used to imply that other women have been placed in the same situation you were in, considering when you start, you're also in a locked bedroom. You just got lucky that somebody gave you the key. And anyway, the tenant here most likely didn't have the same luck as Alisa. We collect the last block here and return to solve the puzzle. It's pretty simple. If you remember Edmonston's note, we can actually use it to solve it since all these blocks revolve around the word fun. So that's it, and the next area is the House of Fun. There's not really a ton to go into detail with on this first section, since a lot of areas are blocked off. There's this stairwell where you can see a note talking about the mandatory sewer level in every survival horror game. You can see the variety of dolls standing or crawling, but there's nothing too much here for me to really dive deep into. But anyway, let's move on to the House of Fun. Have you ever seen Paprika? Short story, it's a beautiful movie about dreams becoming reality, but it's also kind of like Inception. And bizarrely enough, there's a good portion of the movie where dolls are also the antagonist of it. And it's also kind of like just fucked up. You wouldn't be able to tell from the advertising, but it is. And what's important about this tangent is that this movie is made by Satoshi Kon. He made Perfect Blue, which is really, really fucked up. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how freaking scary Perfect Blue is. I'm not gonna tell you what it's about. It's just haunting, and I'm not even like the target audience of who should be afraid after watching it. But I don't know. It's very much scary, and I am very thankful that well, I guess I could have a stalker to that point at some point, but I'm just gonna keep hoping I don't have one, and I'll go from there. Anyway, why do I bring up Satoshi Kon in this video? Well, Satoshi Kon was a visionary. He created art that sort of transcended everything while also showing off the scariest parts of the human psyche. And as we're about to enter the House of Fun, we go through some jail cells filled with creepy doll hands that peer through the bars with no warning. There's a dead clown. There's some traps straight out of Skyrim. Then we get to the House of Fun. Now, Pierre Edmondson is the Satoshi Kon of the Alisa verse. He's the guy who made some really cool stuff and some crazy dark evil stuff. He created the Toothwheel, which allows almost every doll in the game to function, while at the same point, everything in the House of Fun is just kind of crazy and maddening. And there's notes later in the game that imply that his work as well has involved doing some very evil stuff. Satoshi Kon did nothing evil. His only crime is that he was an artist who made stuff that showed off everything about the human condition, both the beautiful and ugly parts of it. If you want an example of that, I'd recommend Paranoia Agent, which is peak fiction and also just something insane to watch. But anyway, beside the point, let's talk about the House of Fun. This place is crazy. There's ghosts on tricycles, there's walking heads, there's clowns, it has it all. But let's talk about the first initial puzzle. There's 3 busts that are all 3 experts who are related to some sections that no longer hold any relevance in this madhouse. Isabella Flora, the biology leader, Herman Heinrich Ham, the psychology leader, and Simon Celsius, which that name goes incredibly hard. He's the astronomy leader. Anyway, that's the puzzle in the House of Fun, is getting party hats for each one. So we go through, there's a sterile medication room where we put Toothwheels in this dummy's chest to get the birdcage key that we'll need later. We go into this room with a clown that hides from... Okay, unironically, these clowns are incredibly scary, but not because they're clowns. It's really more so because they have a lot of killing power and they can stun lock you. There's a room full of crates we push around with the only jack-in-the-box in the game, and I was kind of prepared for it, but also because of, I don't know, what do you expect in a place called the House of Fun and there being a jack-in-the-box in a room like that? And there's another room that, as I said, a buddy of mine played through this already, and he gave me specifically a warning about the save room inside the House of Fun. This one has a scary red man, but you don't even have to, like, look at him to see him, really. You can just do it based off the reticle and gun that guy down. Oh, we find a scary note, and we also find the green cone hat for the puzzle. Now, moving on, we get to go and check out Barbara. We'll talk about her later, but she unironically freaks the fuck out of me. She's the scariest thing in the game, but she's also very much underutilized, and right by her is a puzzle that doesn't make sense currently, since it's for later. and I chose not to get the cone hat since I figured that would unleash Barbara upon me. And then next we go through this David Bowie-esque doll dream sequence, which in reality just turns out to be smoke and mirrors. And since then, we go and get the cone hat, and then we're rewarded by unleashing the Stalker of Alisa. So, who is Barbara, you may be asking, according to the title card and all of these notes? Well, according to notes scattered throughout the game, from what I can gather, she's the facility manager for the most part of what the dollhouse used to be, and there's notes that discuss her receiving letters from a place called the Manor of Tides. But whatever role she used to have has long been forgotten given her monstrous form. She is a giant doll who acts similar to Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, or Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, except there are actually 0 scripted encounters set up with her. So once you enter a room, there's a chance for the area's soundtrack to suddenly cut out and then shift to Barbara's theme, which is the background music you're hearing for this section. That is actually giving me anxiety. When this plays, you have to immediately exit the room, and then you can re-enter it and just hope it doesn't play. And if you exit the room, and then in the room you went back to, you hear it again, you just book it. You just play door tag with her until she goes away. And if she catches you, she grabs you and then carries you to heaven. But I don't know what it is about her. I don't know whether it's something about her design specifically that makes me so uncomfortable, or her, I don't know, her physique. I mean, wait, everybody loved Lady Dimitrescu, but there's something about Barbara that deeply unsettles me, and I'm not really sure why. But anyway, getting this party hat summons Barbara. We match each one up to its occupation, and afterward, we're greeted to this cutscene.
Ah, yes. Someone new has come to have some fun.
Okay. I hate this fight. I hate Pierre Edmiston. Call me a fake gamer, or that I'm only choosing to stand in the spots where I get hit by everything in the entire universe, but I am not a fan. I know what I said earlier, he knows about fun, so how bad could he be? But dude, this fight, I don't know what it is about it. And it is, by technicality, an easy fight. I am just awful at it. So the fight is, Pierre stands in the center of this frantic, unhappy nightmare or fun machine or whatever you want to call it. I made up the acronym, I don't know what it's actually called. But depending on where you stand, either everything will hit you or nothing will hit you. You can't be too far away from him because then the doll hands will get you, but I don't think you should get too close either, considering all the spikes that are attached to him. It's not really about finding the perfect distance to stand in terms of distance. It's more so just being in the right spot to where you don't get punched and or slammed. And once you do that, you can just kind of shoot him until his machine breaks. So it's I don't even know if I'd call it RNG. I don't know if it's the same spot or what, or if it's like a pattern recognition thing. But all you need to do is just stand in a spot and just shoot him. Once you do, he'll charge you with a hammer, Looney Tunes style, and you can just execute him in the name of the Emperor. He drops the pulse meter he borrowed, and bizarrely enough, he drops Toothwheels, despite having the appearance of a full human. But considering he's just pulled away via strings, I wasn't 100% sure about this as I was like going through the cutscenes and rewatching my gameplay footage and reading notes for this video. But this leads me to believe, and I could be crazy, but I think the real Pierre Edmiston has been dead for quite a while. And my guess is that this is either they turned him into a doll, or that it is the original Pierre Edmiston, or it's just a mimic of him almost, considering the fact he is just functionally a doll and a puppet. And I'm certain of this because of those strings that pulled him away. Those are something that only the dolls have access to, so it is possible he just converted himself into a doll to prolong his own life. But I don't know. It's pretty interesting food for thought. But point being, we fall down, and then that's actually it for the whole House of Fun section for now. There's a lot of backtracking in this game, but that's the majority of the section itself. I like the House of Fun because I think it captures the whimsical nature of Alisa. It's a very quirky game, and even though I think there's horror elements, I think a lot of it is more so of a wild adventure throughout. Sort of like a dark comedy, maybe like the Poor Things of it. Well, I'm not really sure exactly what I'd call Poor Things other than a crazy film, but I guess Poor Things and Alisa kind of go hand in hand. But it just sort of gives me that like weird adventure energy that's also like a silly romp through actual terror. Though I do think a lot of the horror itself just comes from the environments and what has already happened, which is interesting to me. I really like the dollhouse as a setting, and I think the game attributes itself well to it. It's weird because I think it's like a weird mix of both fantasy elements and like sci-fi, not in the traditional terms like Dungeons and Dragons or Star Trek, that kind of difference, but more so the fact that there's a bit more like mysticality to everything as opposed to just straight up everything is explained via science or mold like Resident Evil. It's all much more easy to understand, and it's far easier to get a clearer understanding of what exactly is going on. So for that reason, I really like Alisa and how it does itself. But the House of Fun especially is just such a great showcase of everything that I think plays to Alice's strengths in terms of just so many unique enemies. The puzzle is just very simple. It's literally collect the hats, and there's different patterns on each, so you can just set them on the heads without any difficulty. And the fight, I really don't like Pierre. I understand that's a me thing. I do not know anyone else who's had trouble with them, but I don't know. Maybe part of that is because I don't have like online friends to ask either. But that's really all I got. I think it's a good area. I think the lore implications with Pierre and the strings are very intriguing to me, but there's also just not enough evidence in the game to really give me a clear-cut answer. But let's move on and just go to the transition part. We make our way out of the sewer, and next we go see Pole. We're actually greeted with quite the interesting plot twist.
So you defeated Pierre? Well done.
There, behind you.
Ah!
Hello. Now you can bring me your Toothwheels. Yes.
What? After you tried to kill me?
It's you who killed me.
You don't look so dead.
It's kind of weird that Pierre is just now accepted into our court of allies, but I'm the type of guy who uses boss weapons when given the choice in Dark Souls, so I'm not exactly going to turn down his shop. Basically, in addition to just kind of being a second shop, he offers modifications, which are tools from the dolls that you can utilize. The only one I used in my entire playthrough was the Sticky Fingers and Auto Aim one. Basically, Toothwheels flow towards you, which is convenient.
Oh, yes.
But overall, it's not super helpful, and auto-aim, which I thought was very nice, but
Oh, yes.
I also think I could have gone without it in the game. But anyway, moving on, we go through the next puzzle, which is we make our way back down to the House of Fun. We use the pulsometer on the clock, and afterwards we can use it on the sheep bots from the room with the clown. The numbers, I don't think were in order with this, but that's okay. I don't think they actually pulse in order anyway, so it doesn't matter. We get the clock arms. We go back to the sheep room. Now, I know somebody who counted the sheep as they were on the walls, which would make sense, but you actually have to interact with it to understand the correct number to put in on the clock. Anyway, I don't have much of an issue with this puzzle. I think it's alright. I think it needs to be clear as to whether or not you try the pulsometer on the clock, but I also don't think that might be a little too much hand-holding. I don't know. It's hard to think of like a good balance for it, but I think it's okay. I got very few complaints, and I think it's fun. So anyway, once that's done, we make our way back to the mansion with the eye key. There's now some tin men roaming around who have a very cool design. And actually like real guns, and basically we enter the library and run into the spy who stole the blueprints.
Hey, come over here. Open this door. You're under arrest.
You're one of the Emperor's crows, aren't you? Tell you what, we're all equal here, and far away from home. You should forget about those orders. Looks like you've got company there.
Damn it.
We continue to explore, see some lovely ballerinas, kill a random goon walking around, and then we get to go through this machine. And this here is a Resident Evil reference.
Let's see what's wrong with this machine. This thing seems unstable. Got to watch out.
Okay, so this puzzle is absolutely awful. I have seen a bunch of negative reviews talk about this one. I didn't want to go into it in the pre-actual gameplay showcase section. I hate this puzzle. The puzzle itself isn't particularly difficult. It's just not very clear what you're supposed to do, and you don't have much time to do it. Basically, you have to move both bolts from one side to the other side. And you do so by using the first bolt to align everything for the second bolt due to those little like tabs that come out of each of the metal bars. The issue comes in that there's very, very little room for error doing this puzzle, and it feels cheap because when you die, you gotta go through and figure out everything. But at the end of the day, it's also similar to the one, literally the same puzzle from Resident Evil 1, except Barry saves you. Though the walls are just closing in too fast, and it feels bad. I think if there were, like, maybe another 15 to 20 seconds, this would be perfect, or at least as perfect as it can be, but I think it's more so a timing thing. Anyway, let's do the sewer level.
I was almost a sandwich.
Okay, this area is arguably the best in the game, considering there's a place in a survival horror game to heal without the use of inventory management. This little hot spring right here, if you have Alisa strip and then you decide to have her go in it, you can go outside make a cup of coffee, play Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree, maybe read a book. By the time you come back, Alisa will almost be fully healed. This mechanic is great since you can always come back here to heal more, like any time throughout the game, and it lowers the difficulty of inventory management overall, considering you don't have to worry about buying medkits and wasting your precious Toothwheels. Yeah, but anyway, moving on. The main enemies of this place are these glass hags, which are my personal least favorite enemy in the entire game. They take a ton of hits. When they die, they drop glass, and if you step on that while using a barefoot skin, which is something you can do, you're going to take damage walking on it. And when you finally deal major damage to one, they can attack you with limbs missing. It's just a mess, and I just don't have the emotional maturity to fight these guys over and over. There's a pretty interesting note down here about Edith, who has the power to control the substances, but whether or not that's just people being crazy, that interpretation is up to you. We can take a look at the mirror down here in the water level and see something rather wondrous. There's only one room that's associated with colored fish, and it's the one we passed by earlier with the ballerinas, prior to going through the Resident Evil wall trap. So the code here is the number of fish, so I hope you were counting. And I think this is a pretty good puzzle, but the problem stems from if you never check the piano and you see that, you're just lost. And also, the fish thing in the mirror is just kind of nonsensical. I mean, who's going to do that just by pure luck, you know, unless you're just bizarre. But I don't know how they would change it. And I said, I kind of think this part is fine as it is. Anyway, we get the fish key from this, and then we suit up as one of the Emperor's crows, and then we play Bloons tower defense real fast. This is Elise. While we and Alisa are very unfamiliar with her, she's very familiar with us. If you remember when we woke up in the dollhouse, we were gifted a gun, a key, and a note explaining the situation. Elise is the one who brought us down here, and you can see her in the very first room at the start of the game when you gun down that doll. She's just laying there. And I didn't notice this until later, but if you return to that room, I think after killing Pierre, you'll notice that she's now gone. She's down here now, and we have to play a short arena segment to get her leg back. It's pretty fun, honestly, but there's not a ton we talk about. Dolls show up, you kill them using the guns you have, and that's it. And overall, I think it's just a pretty fun segment. I don't feel super strongly about it. And I don't know. Basically, you just return her leg afterwards.
I'm so grateful that you returned my leg. Next time you're in trouble, I'll be there to return the favor. Oh, and I found this on my way here. You might need it.
And this causes Elise to promise to help you later on. And you also get a book, which is used for a puzzle later. But Elise will actually help you no matter which boss you fight next. There's a small bit of freedom here in the game where we can choose which boss to fight next. But in my playthrough, we went through and used her for the sewer fight. But unbeknownst to me at the time, I could have used that book to do the next puzzle and then go to the next area instead and had her help me with that fight. So I'm not going to go into depth, Elise, right here, due to the fact there's one more revelation I would like to see before we talk about it, so we'll go from there. Okay, so next up is the water maze. The game shows off a fish suit in the shop specifically for swimming, but that's a scam. If you have Alisa stripped down, you get basically all the same benefits. and the glass hags in the water are ridiculously easy compared to their land evolved counterparts. This maze, though, is absolutely horrible, and the worst part is, I can only blame myself. So when you're walking to the room that Alisa's in, you can actually look over the railing, and Alisa will comment and write down the entire maze in her map. So you're just not roaming around guessing on where to go, but I didn't know that, so I didn't do that. This maze sucks. It'd be super easy if you just looked over the railing, and I think it's a fun detail, but man, that's the only place in the game you do this, so I don't know, missed opportunity there. There's not much in terms of actual content or maze. There's no con for going the wrong way. There's a few notes that talk about Edith and a few items, but overall just a slow romp, especially if you are not a stripped down Alisa or in the fish outfit. You're gonna be trudging through that. And I made that trudge to wear the Emperor's armor for going through for the next boss. For this fight, Elise joins us now that she has both her legs, and overall, this fight is kind of super easy when you have Elise. You can evenly divide the aggro between the two of you, and I just kind of gunned her down without any difficulty. Her moves aren't particularly hard, and I think this is just a fun boss fight overall. It's very much a weird situation, because despite being able to read about Edith, I don't know much about her. So, from what I can take away from the note, she did turn into a glass hag like everyone else. But then she began mutating for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. I have theories later on, which I can talk about once you've seen all of the elements for me to talk about and walk you through my reasoning. But overall, I'm not entirely sure what made Edith so special. But I think she's a very interesting boss and character, because she's the only one who's in like this stagnant state by the time we reach her. As in, like, I guess it isn't that crazy. One boss just was stuck not moving until the game started. And you just took the item to trigger the fight. But I think it's pretty interesting that she's the only one in the game that was like that when you ran into her. But anyway, finishing the fight with Edith, which is super easy. Not everybody wins. Now, what exactly happened to Elise from here? I honestly couldn't tell you, but that's the last we see of both Barbara and Elise the entire game. And that is wild to me. And it's actually highly implied that they're related to the old man or have some association to the old man from the very beginning that Jean-Francois was interrogating at the start of the game. Elise matches the description of the girl in the red dress, and as said, right by her side in the photo is Barbara. And it would make sense for Barbara to be here and have association with the village that's so close, considering she's working there and communicating with the Manor of Tides. Now, there's only one more point I can talk about with their relationship with the other endings, but I couldn't tell you much about Barbara and Elise's relationship other than due to the fact that despite being a doll, Elise is one of the most human characters we meet in the game. And before we go on, I do want to mention one thing specific. So basically, once you receive Alisa's leg, you don't actually have to return it to her. You can take it to Pierre, who will then convert it into a modification for you to use. And the benefit of this is, well, one, okay, you're required to get all modifications for a later ending we'll talk about. But the benefit is you get a very different outcome with this, where Elise will leave a note talking about how she was unable to help you. And the crazy thing is that she mentioned she was once like us, and that she had, like, resistance and wasn't, just a complete doll. And we'll talk a bit more about what the finger of God is later, since I know this note doesn't make much out of context. But I do think it's just very interesting that Elise was just a regular, like, human and retained all of her humanity as she went through the situation. But that's it there. So we go back through the dollhouse, kill the few glass hags that left the sewer, go to the library, and use the book Elise gave to us earlier. This is one of the puzzles where when you interact with something, the others are moved. Basically, we just want to get every book pushed in, and we don't have the willpower to push them all in at once like a normal human being. These can take forever, but they can also be super short. You just kind of go through and move everything, and then once you do that, you're all good. So we collect the tree key from this and make our way to the garden as the next area. I honestly really like Edith. I think Edith is kind of shafted compared to the other bosses in terms of content. And I don't have a ton to build off of for the character for this whole discussion, but I like them. I like them a lot. I hope we get to see more of them in Alisa the Parting, but realistically that won't happen. And I think it's kind of funny. I like her design and the little tidbits of information we get about her, when in reality the enemies in her area I just absolutely hate. I just cannot stand playing through that section of the game compared to all the other ones. But I don't know. There's just something very much appealing about the way the glass hags write their notes, and the way that Edith is just so monstrous compared to everything else. You'll see this later on, but almost every boss, I would say, in the game retains their humanoid-ish form much better than Edith specifically. And I guess part of that is because she mutated and turned into a glass octopus or whatever. But I think there was just something so unique about how she specifically had such a strong reaction to whatever was happening down there. And it makes me want to know more about these inorganic and organic experiments, but it also makes me wonder more about what kind of character Edith could have had. And in reference to Elise and Barbara, I think it's very interesting to have a dynamic of the only two people from the village that we get to hear about ended up through such different and drastic transformations, with Barbara becoming almost like this enforcer, this just monstrous phantom, and Elise basically being a doll version of Alisa, given her moveset and her weapons. It's just a super cool, just like world building and storytelling without any of like depth or nuance. It's like showing, not telling. And yeah, that's really about the extent of it. It really, like, by this point, I was pretty thrilled with it. Like, I do not think there is another Resident Evil-esque game you should be going after right now. There's plenty of other, like, fantastic survival horror games, though. Like, if you haven't played Signalis, you should definitely play that. But I really like this section and the world that Alisa has created, and I like thinking about it and exploring just the very ideas. Very ideas? I don't even know what that means. I just like thinking about the ideas for each character and how they play when there's so little information given, if that makes sense. I'm not sure whether the garden is significantly shorter than the sewers, or if it just feels shorter than the sewers. This is the area I'm pretty sure I missed the most content, but I'll get into that. It's unique in the fact here, though, that the enemies aren't actually dolls, or at least not in terms of appearance. Like, they still drop Toothwheels, but they take the form of like hulking metallic plant monsters and just large goofy flies. And while these giant metal dudes in the garden look the part of being intimidating, I honestly think they're the easiest enemies in the game, or like the easier ones. All you need to do is strafe around them with your sword and just poke them until they die. The area is largely uneventful. There's a lot of notes here that talk about miners and what they're doing over there, and you just kind of progress through pulling levers to open different paths. And there's a secret shortcut to the sewer here. So the Teeth Stone is an item you can only get one of, and you buy it from Pier after his fight. This is a place where you can use it, and I used it to get the rope. Now, using the rope, you can get two things with it. Either a crossbow, if you do it in the correct spot, or a shortcut to the sewer. I am a moron, and I got the shortcut to the sewer. That provided 0 bonus other than it spawned some glass hags, and it spawned some of the metal plant monsters down there. And that's it. There's only a single key here that's just used for the boss, but this boss fight is pretty unique though, so let's just go into it.
Aki?
Who dares enter my garden? You are here to take my throne, aren't you? Let's see what you're made of. I see. You came without firearms. Then this will be a fair fight.
This boss fight is pretty unique in the fact that this one is voice acted by an actual YouTuber. Her name is the Sphere Hunter. I have never watched any of her videos whatsoever, but from what I can see, she covers a lot of video games, and video games are good, so that works out. Anyway, you actually get a unique interaction if you step up to Isabella Flora without firearms, and if this was the fight you did after returning Alisa, it'd be 1,000,000 times harder, since she would summon 2 guards, making it a 2v3. And what's funny as well is if you don't bring firearms, she doesn't use her full moveset from what I saw from the other videos I watched. So even though I did this fight in one try with like the most minimalist challenge, I guess, I seriously struggled with it. A buddy of mine told me you could parry Isabella in this fight by aiming your sword at the right time. And maybe that's true, maybe it isn't, but man, I should have played Elden Ring or something to practice, because I got my teeth kicked in every time I tried to. Like, every time. I eventually just decided to resort to guerrilla hit and run tactics for my own survival. I like how this fight is a duel though, and I like Isabella's design, and I think I prefer her area overall, just because I can't stand the glass hags that roamed around the last one. But in regards to her presence in the story, we know she actually was the biology leader due to the puzzle in order to get into Pier Edmonston's arena, but I'm not entirely sure what science they practiced, since she, along with everyone else in the garden, is just a weird mix of organic and inorganic matter with both metals and plant biology. Though we did beat her, I wrote down without difficulty, but I did have difficulty. But that's okay. So, check this out.
No. I can't let you take it all.
So, we take the right-hand key from her corpse, but as we leave, we see a very weird scene, actually.
Look at my beautiful garden. Flowers of every season, all year long. If only it could remain.
From what I can see, I think this implies that whatever science Isabella did at this place led to some perversion of natural beauty or perhaps something to do with our own nature on how we appreciate it. Just being so caught up in the naturally occurring beauty of nature and forgetting that changing nature's creations distorts the fleeting nature that makes them so wonderful to look at in the first place. I'm not 100% sure whether that's it, but the whole kind of facility kind of echoes this sentiment. Oh, and on the way back, I was scared for my life. I was low on health. I was trying to remember the way back, and I hear this clown dude, and my blood freezes. And there was a second one right by the save room, so I had to cut through the library to make it without being annihilated. That was probably the scariest moment of my entire playthrough for me. But anyway, we can use the right hand key to access a secret upper place in the chapel using the elevator, and that grants us a warrior medallion. Utilizing this medallion and the one Edith had in her hand earlier that we snatched, we make our way to the upper heavens. So there's one thing you may have noticed with Isabella's death. When Isabella or anybody else who's like a giant metal plant monster dies, they almost return to nature in a weird way. They almost turn into trees as you see them slowly collapse and grow. And I don't know if I'd call it like nature healing, or I'm not entirely sure what even to call it in all fairness. But there's just something about it that is oddly, I want to say weird, but I don't know if that's the right word. It's just something very unnatural, while at the same time, it's almost like they're healing in a sense from what they have become. In reference to Isabella's The Beautiful Garden, and if only it could remain real, I wonder if that vision of bright color that Alisa sees, or we saw, I don't know if she saw it, right outside the boss arena, was how Isabella saw the flowers through that metal. And the only way that she sort of came to the realization of what had been done was through her own destruction, as her body was forcing her to return to nature. Is this correct? Is this true? I don't know, but I think it's also a little more fitting that we don't know the entire truth of Isabella Flora. I think she has a very intriguing situation and mystery, but it's nice that in her final moments, there's almost a section of understanding, or at least that's how I choose to interpret it, since it's a lot less bleak, I think, than dying some giant metal plant monster. Yeah. This is another one of those classic segments that people just don't like. And you can call me people, because I don't like this one. Though I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people have stated. It's the only stealth section in the entire game, and it's only 2 rooms long. I just don't think it makes much sense. And it isn't fun in this game, but that cutscene pretty much summarizes what happens if you're caught, since the moment one of those mechanical hippogriffs spot you, you're gunned down, just like that guy. I have a couple friends who really, really hate this part and feel super strong about it, but it's only 5 to 10 minutes long, and it isn't that bad. Do I dislike it? Yeah, totally, but it doesn't ruin the game for me. It's not like a huge flaw. It's just a section I don't like because I'm bad at it. Just sneak by, don't go too fast, pull the levers, bam, you're golden. Once you do that, they immediately despawn, and you should go ahead and save for the next segment right here. After I pulled the lever, I stopped to examine what is arguably the world's most important paperweight, the Finger of God. Not the real one, this one's fictional, but we'll learn a bit more about this later. But for now, all you need to know is that this item holds immense power. All the stuff referencing it prior will make way more sense, and that while we've heard rumors of it in notes throughout the game, we actually don't know about it at this point, other than this holds immense power. We explore around the chapel a bit more, discover a note that discusses chemicals, find chemical type A, and afterwards we go ahead and make our way out when the next cutscene plays.
Aha! If it isn't our crow again.
Wait! I'm just here for the blueprint.
Long gone. What your emperor was planning is no longer relevant to me. For my safety is guaranteed here, since I became the king of this castle.
What are you talking about?
Magnificent. Very impressive indeed. Your strength that has survived so far is certainly an obstacle. However, I have been endowed with great power. I am literally invincible, and now your end has come.
The blueprints, the reason we ended up in this crazy dollhouse in the first place, all gone. Don't matter. All gone, just like Albertus Alvarez's sanity. This boss fight threw me for a loop the first time I initiated, since out of everything in my survival horror bingo card, I wasn't expecting Mario Kart. The fight control is pretty good, that's not an issue. It's just kind of hard to understand all of his attack patterns immediately, though his fight never really evolves more than moving from one side of the screen to the other. And that's okay, because I actually think this fight is kind of hard. I do think it's fun, and I do think it's satisfying just shooting at him. And the soundtrack for it is unironically my favorite in the entire game. And other than that, I don't have too much to say, since we kind of gotta see this before I can go into detail on anything.
It's over. Everyone becomes mad here. That thing there, it bears an unearthly power. It protects this place. You have to destroy it. There is an incomplete chemical bomb in a room near the library.
But why?
It's your only way out of here. The one and only exit is barricaded. But once this thing is gone, this place will slowly fall apart. And then it's your chance.
Why should I trust you?
Because you have to know the truth about your Emperor's blueprints. There are people out there. They will show it to you.
The Emperor is not a liar.
Now, I think it's interesting that after the fight, Albertus seems to regain his sanity, and I think that he has a strong understanding that the dollhouse has the Alice in Wonderland effect, with everyone who stays there slowly becomes mad, or I guess in Albertus's case it wasn't that slow. But I do believe he's correct in his assumption that the finger of God is the reason that everyone is losing their mind, along with it being the fabric that holds this underground madhouse together. Hearing about the idea that the Emperor's blueprints may be for something more sinister as well adds to the intrigue, since the game tells us almost nothing about the Emperor. The only information we have to draw from is Alisa stating that the Emperor isn't a liar, though we have our final task, the destruction of the finger of God, which is the same thing Alisa told us in that note, in the case that you take her leg and go and make yourself a weapon out of it. But that's it. The Finger of God can be seen as divine intervention. It's a real thing, and I believe it's also a real rock formation. You can look it up if you want. But since I believe the actual one is not a finger. Yeah, there it is. I'm not going to try to say how it's actually pronounced, but I think it's Mukurab, and it's a sandstone rock formation. So it is a real thing, somewhat. As in, there's a rock formation of it. There is no mystical finger of God like how I said it. Anyway, the finger of God is pretty unique in the sense that I believe it to be the cause of everything that happens in Alisa. There's more to it that I can't talk about until we reach the actual spoiler territory for the endings of the game. But basically, I believe the Finger of God has been the catalyst for all of this research, and I also believe it played a very large role in driving Albertus Alvarez to his own insanity. I think it almost emanates power and radiance, and is one of the things that's keeping everybody bound to the dollhouse. There's so much about the Finger of God we just don't know, and there's so much we probably won't know until Alisa the Parting comes out, but the major cliff notes for the Finger of God is that this is an artifact of extreme and immense power, and that Albertus Alvarez is correct in saying that it needs to be destroyed, and so is Alisa when she writes to Alisa it needs to be destroyed. The Finger of God has to go. It's keeping everybody bound here in their own madness, and it has to be removed due to the fact as well it has powers that are just too extreme. You can see from the very start of the game with at the House of Fun, a guy touched the Finger of God and it messed up his hands. It's just too strong to remain. So the remainder of the game consists of the destruction of the Finger of God. In regards to how Albertus Alvarez grew cherub wings and just supernatural power, I attribute that to the Finger of God as well. I think that is how he got those developments, considering how knowledgeable he was on it, and it seemed like the hippogriffs were serving him. Now, in reference to how he had the mental process on how to become king and all that, the king of this castle, my thing is I don't think he ever went to the dollhouse with that in mind. I think it's possible, but I do believe that the initial goal and plan was always about the Emperor's blueprints. I think just the longer Albertus Alvarez stayed, the more bizarre he became due to his circumstances, which leads me down this like rabbit hole train of thought that he was perfectly sane, but it's possible that the whole reason he took the blueprints in the first place was for the Manor of Tides, which know about the facility. I don't know, which sucks. I want to know. But Albertus Alvarez has a much larger role given that he was the one who kicked everything off with the blueprints. And the only way to really know about that more is for Casper Crows to give us more lore. But Albertus Alvarez, he has the unique distinction of being a character who knows about both the Emperor's blueprints and the Finger of God, which nobody else in the game has a complete understanding of at this time. So from here, it's more so a matter of finishing out the game, since we don't really get much more understanding about the Finger of God other than some of its properties. So we'll go into that. This whole part of the game is backtracking and doing anything that you wanted to do earlier but couldn't do, like killing enemies that you didn't have the ammo for, or looking for any missing collectibles in order to build the bomb. Basically, it's a checklist. We need Chemical A, found in the room right before the Albertus Alvarez fight. Chemical C, which is found in that weird medicine room with the toothwheel puzzles inside the anatomical body inside the House of Fun. And the winding mechanism, which is back in the chapel. In order to figure that out, in the room with the bomb ready to be crafted, there's a diagram in the order to light the candle. So we just do that back in the chapel. And then after that, the bomb is fully ready to be crafted. There's nothing too crazy about this segment other than there's more enemies throughout the house now since they're just repopulating, but nothing that particularly stands out. Now, I think... No, I can't ignore the elephant in the room. That thing peeking out does stand out. Anyway, now that we return to the finger of God with bomb in hand, from here, this is where the game ends.
Paul?
Oh, my little doll. Why are you trying to run away from home? I will teach you good manners by disassembling.
It's a creepy thought to know how close Alisa was to this guy the entire playtime, and how he stalked us from room to room. Though, in reality, we were just another doll added to the dollhouse from his perspective, and he was just playing with us, giving us toys, and watching us run around and have fun. From what I understand, he's the only patient who survived interacting with the finger of God directly, which is why he is so distorted. Though, he also has some supernatural ability to control the dolls. Now, you can actually dictate the difficulty of this fight. Now, according to the internet, which nobody is allowed to lie on, his strength here is dependent on how many Toothwheels you spent at the shop. You can even see him pull Toothwheels towards himself during the fight to heal, and this fight is largely, you run around, you shoot him, you get hit trying to reload, you reload, and then continue the cycle. He can summon enemies to this fight, but the ones he summoned during my run of it made this fight pretty easy. He can summon the crawling dolls, which are much more difficult, but the flies don't really do anything. There's not a ton to talk about without first going through the ending, so take a look at this. And yeah, I know the voice acting is wild, but what can you do?
I didn't swallow my cure-dent.
I get chills. I get a lot of chills every time I see ending A and the reveal that Jean-Francois did in fact not actually swallow his toothpick. And I don't know whether it's sinister or not, but he will be the protagonist of Alisa the Parting, which is intriguing to me. I am so excited to see what happens from here. In regards to the truth of the actual blueprints, Albertus Alvarez knew that she would be seeing the blueprints. He stated that somebody would show her, and now that she has the truth about the blueprints, I don't know. I don't know what they could be, but it's pretty exciting. In regards to the actual Dollmaster's statement with how can you resist the power, or however else he says it, this is actually due to the different requirements for each ending. So we just received ending A. Ending A comes from having 1 to 2 doll enhancements, but they have to be either the sticky fingers magnet one or the makeup. I don't think you can actually have both, so I think that might just be 0 modifications or 1 modification if it's the magnetic finger one or the makeup. I think it's because those don't actually compromise your humanity. From what I perceive it as, the magnetic fingertips are a glove and makeup is purely cosmetic, as in literally, while all the other doll upgrades are specifically augmentations of the body. But in regards to that, that is how Alisa was able to break free of the Dollmaster, as to why Elise could not. Elise had the doll upgrade of the hidden blades or the hidden sheath. I don't know what they called, but it's a pretty crazy ending, all things considered. Jean-Francois is a very interesting character to me, because that means he deliberately chose not to run after Albertus, which leads me to believe they both could be associated with the Manor of Tides, or just have some association that isn't to the Emperor. Alisa is the only person in the game, to me, who strikes me as being solely loyal to the Emperor during the events of Alisa. And I don't know if that's the case after she sees the blueprints. I'm not entirely sure what they could be for, but the fact they are blueprints implies that perhaps this is yet to be created. But this could be in relation to what they were studying at the facility. Now, in regards to getting the other endings, there's 3 total. Well, there's technically 4, but the third one is kind of the same. So I'll talk about them with... That was ending A, which is my personal favorite. I think it's canon, but who am I to say? I can't tell you. Next up is ending B, which you receive if you have 2 to 5 modifications out of the total sets. Ending C is if you have all sets, and I'm going to call this next one ending C+, because it's pretty similar. Ending C+ is if you have all sets and Elise is still alive. So the only way to get it would be New Game Plus, since you would need Elise's leg to get the upgrade. So let's go ahead and talk about each one as they pop up.
Resist the moment you were injected with Admiston's Toothwheels.
Okay, lots to talk about here. Ending B is a result of actually augmenting yourself with the doll augmentations. This comes from the Toothwheels, as the doll master says, and I do think it has something to do with him and his relationship, as in the doll master's relationship with the finger of God, that keeps you bound to that place. So after that, immediately kidnapped and brought back into the place, where, as you can see, Alisa is transformed into a full doll for the most part. You can tell from her mechanical fingers, which gives you a good look as she's playing the piano. Now, the only thing that leaves me a little curious is I'm not sure whether the explosion in Ending B is the one from the initial bomb or a separate explosion. I personally am led to believe this is a separate explosion, which is caused as a result of an outside party, be it Jean-Francois and Alisa the Parting, or the Manor of Tides, or something else completely new entirely. The reason I say that and don't fall into the belief that's the same explosion is because that is just so much time for Alisa to fully convert to a doll like that. I mean, it's a whole different outfit and everything. Now, granted, I guess I can't cite a different outfit, meaning it's not the same situation. But I personally am hesitant to believe that it's the same explosion as the first one. But I do think it is technically possible. But I don't know, because the bomb was literally right there. They could have just disassembled it with all those dolls that charged in. But that's also not a good argument, considering they could have disassembled it in Ending A. So I'm led to believe that it's either the same explosion or a separate explosion, but the point is Alisa has been converted to be a pawn for the doll master, fully completed, due to the inclusion of Toothwheels inside of her body. And a lot of this adds to the idea, what even is inside a Toothwheel? A Toothwheel takes the appearance of a gear, but they definitely have properties beyond that of regular gears, given how the doll master uses them. And it seems like he's injecting them into himself, considering he heals using them during the boss fight. So I believe they have some sort of property not listed that could once again be related to the finger of God. But moving on, this is once again another big reveal of Jean-Francois. You can tell from the toothpick he has in his mouth. But moving on, let's talk about Ending C, because I think that one is very interesting as well, with a whole lot of food for thought.
No, how can you resist the power?
I'll show you power.
Ending C is kind of freaky. It's not the freakiest ending, or maybe it is. It's pretty dark, but What's interesting to me, well, okay, hold on. First, I gotta say, I'm really happy to see the Tin Men again. I never saw any green dolls throughout my playthrough, but it was nice seeing the Tin Men soldiers show up as Alisa takes the place of the Doll Master. And it was pretty metal how she just resisted the power by making them go roar and choke on the bomb and die. So, let's talk about it. The Doll Master has some weird association with Pull and Peer. I'm not sure whether it's a testament to Alisa's own insanity, given that she takes both Pull and Peer as her place of supreme power, now that she is the master of the dollhouse. But it's important to realize that in this ending, the dollhouse is not destroyed either. In both ending A and B it is, but in C and C+, they remain fully complete. Now, I think this implies, or could imply, that Pull and Peer holds some connection to the finger of God, or perhaps it's just an imprint on Alice's psyche. It doesn't really matter too much whether or not she's a fan of puppets as her new place as doll overlord, but I think it's cool. And the way to get this ending is you get all sits and Elise is dead. Now, let's talk about the major, big, bad, secret ending. Well, I guess A would probably be the most secret, considering everybody will just buy doll enhancements their first playthrough if they don't know how to do it. So let's move on to ending C+, which you get if Elise is alive and you have all sits enhancements.
No, how can you resist the power?
I'll show you power.
This ending to me, ending C+, is the one that makes the least amount of sense to me. I know the least about it, and I think it's because, well, it isn't that different from ending C, but I think it's because Elise knew that the finger of God needed to be destroyed. And she acted out of her own free will to help Alisa. I believe she used her own free will, given that she explained the finger of God needed to be destroyed, even though she was a doll, and that she had the understanding to know to help Alisa to make that happen. But here in this ending, she's in a completely subservient role, bringing the crown to Alisa, who is the new doll master. Though it does imply Alisa has surpassed the doll master in terms of influence in ending C, so the same is the same for ending C+. But what makes this ending weird is you get to see Barbara in it. You don't get to see her in ending B, ending A, or ending C. And one thing I never noticed until rewatching this is that Barbara is the exact inverse of Alisa in terms of clothing in this ending. Alisa wears the white dress, Barbara wears complete black. Now, Barbara wore black even before she was a doll, similar to Elise wearing red before she was a doll. But there's just something so unsettling about Barbara's expression in this ending, and I can't make out whether it's good or bad or what exactly it even means or implies. Ending C+ creates more questions than it does answers for Elise and Barbara, because it also means in all the endings Barbara did not kill Elise. I don't know what she did with Elise once she finally caught her, but it means that Elise is still alive throughout the events of all of them. That's how I'm taking it, which is a good revelation. But I'm not sure what Barbara's purpose does without the Dollmaster, since it seems Barbara had free will of her own, but she was also just a completely malevolent entity from everything that I saw. And it's just weird seeing her again, but seeing her also just kind of freaks me out. Anyway, that's it, I think, for all of the endings. They all create more questions than they do answers. And I think they're all very intriguing from an aspect of what happens. Ending A, Alisa successfully leaves without being modified, and she finds out that Jean-Francois completely faked his incident to escape. Or not to escape. She finds out Jean-Francois completely faked his incident of choking on the toothpick during the chase, and that he was fine throughout. Ending B implies that another explosion happens inside the dollhouse that causes its destruction as the broken doll Alisa crawls away. Ending C implies that Alisa has become the new Dollmaster in complete power and control. But the only standout part is that she uses pull and peer once again as the original Dollmaster did, which is bizarre, but it's less crazy for the overall grand timeline. Ending C+ makes things weird, knowing that Elise and Barbara are fine, and well, as fine as they can be as mechanical dolls serving a new overlord. But that's Alisa. It's a fantastic game, and I hope you enjoyed hearing me lose my marbles about it, because I sure am a wacky guy who has a lot of goopy takes on this game, but it's great. It is a fantastic survival horror game. It's a testament to the genre, and I think you're missing out if you're yet to try it. I think one of the beautiful things about it being so dated is that it's much more creative visually and mechanically. Well, I don't know how creative mechanically it is, but it's groundbreaking in a way that I didn't know a PS1 game could. And I didn't even have a PS1 as a kid, so I couldn't tell you. But let's wrap things up now. Alisa is a beautifully twisted world showing off a very similar one to Resident Evil, with it's that age-old story of science gone wrong and everyone suffers for it. It's like that meme where it's like, don't poke the bear, and they did poke the bear, and now the bear got out and killed everybody. But at least it's not like that other situation where a woman would either have to meet a full-grown man or a bear. That doesn't make much sense. But the point is, Alisa's lore is very deep and surprisingly complex given how little there is of it in the actual game itself. The gameplay, while many call it stunted and disjointed, I think it's pretty fun, but I do think that without the window dressing of, what was his name, Svank Maher's Alice, I do think the game wouldn't be as fantastic as it is. But there's one thing this game excels at that I haven't touched on at all, though you've heard it throughout this entire video: the soundtrack. The soundtrack of Alisa is brilliant. All of these sounds feel like they just fit every room. It's a weird feeling going through and using them for my own video as the backing track, because part of it feels weird taking them away from their location in Alisa. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that these sounds are so synonymous with that dollhouse. The voice acting is bad. The voice acting is terrible. It's awful. But it's bad on purpose. And I don't think it's comically horrible. I just think it's comically bad, and that's where it should be. The game is campy, it's silly, there's references to old games, but it also has a ton of replay value. New Game Plus is pretty cool. You get to meet Lucian, who is also Doll Master. He's another puppet in the Hell Room. There's a lot of fun to be had with going through. You can fish, it's just like Hades or Far Cry 5, which is a game people bought for the fishing. There's just a lot to love and explore and enjoy with Alisa, and I feel like this game has been kind of like stolen from almost. This game is only $18 and I've spent so much time with it, like talking about it with my friends and family and investigating it, and it is fantastic, and I think it's far more fantastic than 904 reviews. My hope with this video is not only to bring attention to the world of Alisa and how much I enjoy it and the gameplay. Even though I have a few gripes here and there, I do think the gameplay is pretty fun. I wouldn't have gone through and played through all of it if I didn't think it was fun. And I really enjoy just the world, the storytelling, and I think it is successfully a throwback to like a different era of games, but now this is just sort of exceeded everything. I don't know. I love this. And I guess I'll have to make a video on the original Resident Evil, since it's been 2 million years since I played that game, and I'd want to compare the two to have like a fair comparison back and forth. But my major conclusion from this is that this game is amazing and it deserves way more. It was a Horror Game of the Year 2022 finalist, which is cool, but this really should have got more attention, and my hope with this video is to bring more attention to it. So, I don't know, share this video to whoever you think would enjoy it. I'm not normally one for, like, showing, but this game deserves more attention. Play the game, check it out. Alisa the Parting is coming, and once it does, we are so gonna talk about everything. And yeah, that's it. I'm super sorry for the delay with videos. A ton of stuff happened, but it's all sorted through now. So we're getting back, and we're gonna succeed because we have to. This has to happen. Just like Alisa has to get more attention. Please, please, please check it out. Like, comment, subscribe, do whatever. I don't care. Check out Alisa. I love you guys.